Well, welcome to Texas Connect Extra, everyone. We are so glad that you've decided to join us this morning. I'm going to tell you a little bit about today's presenter. We have with us Dr. Ana Krahmer. She is the current director of the Texas Digital Newspaper Unit, the largest single state open access repository of newspapers in the U.S. She works with partners across Texas to digitally preserve and build access to newspapers. She will be showing us tips and tricks for making the most of the portal to Texas history. So we will turn the time over to you now, Dr. Krahmer.
Thank you so much, Summer. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay, very good.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me today. I manage the Texas Digital Newspaper Program and the Digital Newspaper Unit out of University of North Texas Libraries. This represents over 8 million pages of newspapers with over 1,700 titles from partners across Texas. And I'll walk you all through what partners mean and how perhaps you or your local library could become a partner.
Ana,
Yes,
can I stop you for a minute? I'm sorry, I
yes.
forgot to mention, if any of you have questions while Ana is presenting, please put them in the chat box and we will try to answer them as we go along. Thank you.
And these are across 208 counties in Texas. We are trying to get all 254 counties, although in Texas, not all counties publish newspapers. So this just might mean that I go to a very rural county in Texas and publish a newspaper just to be able to put it into TD&P. And these newspapers span from 1813 to the present day. Now some of you might be wondering, 1813 and Texas Digital Newspaper Program. That is a little strange, and I will show you why that might be strange in just a little bit. If you've never used the portal to Texas history, the URL is right here. Feel free to screenshot this. Eventually, we will be doing a scavenger hunt where I will expect you to go in and find some things on the portal to Texas history. The newspapers we have are, you can kind of view the geographic locations. As you can see, we've got a few holes in West Texas, particularly very rural areas of Texas, as well as in South Texas, where it was primarily cattle ranching, and the King family down there in South Texas, and the Kennedy family as well, who formed a county. Formed a county and didn't publish a newspaper. Very irresponsible of them. But if you do happen to see this map and think, gosh, I know a publisher and a library from that area of Texas, I might like to work on the portal. I will give you my contact information at the end because I would like to work with you. Oops, I went back. All right. Before I move forward, I just want to mention that the newspaper program does host over 200 years of materials. These may represent hurtful beliefs and imagery, reflecting the worldview of the original newspaper creators. This does not reflect the values of TD&P, the Portal Texas History, or University of North Texas Libraries. And we've not censored these materials because providing access to an accurate historical record allows researchers to analyze these in the context of their original expression. So the Texas Digital Newspaper Program hosts newspapers, not, for instance, the full run of the Dallas Morning News. Rather, these are newspapers from across the state, from sometimes very rural areas of Texas, from groups who published newspapers because that newspaper was the true voice of the city and of the community. And it was how information went out to the whole public. Many of these newspapers are from cities below 50,000 in Texas. This is considered hyper-local news, and a lot of you are from Texas or aware of Texas history. But I will say I go to national conferences and people who do this work in other states with big cities. I'm not going to say New York and California. Oops, I just did. But they'll say, well, why are you doing all weekly newspapers? just so many of those rather than the big city dailies? Well, because you know what? The big city dailies are where you will get the wire service articles published across the country. The local weekly newspapers are where you're going to find out about the daily lives and really be able to use this as a time machine to see how people lived, how they reacted to world events locally, and what was going on in their cities. These are just a few examples. We have newspapers, as you knew, as I've shown you, across the state. We host newspapers for communities, for universities, for high schools, even. And in one case, one issue from a junior high school, from a gentleman who lived out in Lubbock, Texas, who'd published, he grew up in the DFW area, and as a young student, when he was 13, published a newspaper for Armstrong Junior High. I think it might have been Armstrong Middle School at that time, but yes, we do have that as well. Now I mentioned 1813, why that was unique. The other types of newspapers we have in the Portal, Texas history are newspapers that talk about Texas history that weren't published in Texas because Texas wasn't a state. It was not a part of the United States at that point. It was still a part of Spain in 1813. And this was coverage from Washington, D.C., the National Intelligencer, in which Texas played a key role, particularly San Antonio. And you can get and it's actually very graphic, so I will warn you, there is a lot of graphic content, blow by blow, literally, details about the battles that happened around and in San Antonio and about the population having to flee, primarily women and children, flee the city from Spanish soldiers. If you're interested in reading these accounts, in addition to the spelling of San Antonio, S-A-N, you can read the account by Saint, S-T, Antonio, and you will find both phrases in the newspapers um, used interchangeably pretty often. So just be aware if you do want to read these 1813 papers, that is what it is. We also host newspapers from other states that covered Texas issues or covered things that were particularly important or necessary to cover during different time periods. So you will see some newspapers from not from Texas, but it is primarily Texas. The thing about these newspapers, I attended a conference a few years ago in Singapore, actually, the World Library Information Congress news media section hosted a conference. I was presenting about the Texas Digital Newspaper Program, and they put me on a panel with a gentleman named Robert Allen, very nice person, who told me before he got up to present, "Oh, I can't wait to hear your presentation." I thought, "Oh, that's so nice. He's friends with my boss, and he'd already asked me to say hello to her." Um, and I thought that what a nice person. Well, he got up and he was from MIT. He'd actually recently retired from MIT and said his presentation was about using the Texas Digital Newspaper Program to build a virtual reality world where people could recreate towns through the newspapers, through information in the newspapers, the OCR text, and actually for VR using, for instance, things like Oculus Rift, um, look through those towns at different decades based on what was found in newspapers. And I got to thinking, well, if I had $1 billion, I would love to be able to do that. That's a lot of money. And he, of course, said this is very, very theoretical. It's just an idea, and I think it's brilliant. I do love the idea. Beyond just the fact that he was talking about my little baby, the Texas Digital Newspaper Program, I loved the idea. But then I got to thinking, well, really, you can still rebuild a town even now in virtual reality and find the footprints of different areas that might not exist anymore. For instance, I got to thinking, I had worked with somebody in Fairfield and we're talking about different grocery stores and access. And I started looking up the Sanitary Grocery Market. And I thought, what a strange name. And I'd done some research about food and development of the FDA and about health and safety and the USDA. And the reason they're called the sanitary grocery was very entrenched in the events that were happening around food, health, and safety. Um, and I found all kinds of information about this sanitary grocery, which eventually, interestingly, became a part of the museum. So I really enjoyed being able to read up on what was going on with different um, situations in town because you can rebuild these towns. Not necessarily what you'll see today. You can rebuild them though over the decades to figure out what they look like, what they looked like back then. And then this is actually, you can find your own history. For instance, the house I live in was built in 1937. The person who lived here bought this house in the early 1950s, though I don't have that information, the exact date. I need to look that up. Her name was Dr. Davis, and I call her Dr. Davis because my neighbors who knew her said, "Oh yes, she always insisted we call her Dr. Davis." Um, in my head, she helped me write my dissertation, and I heard her say, "Get the damn thing done, Anna," as I was sitting on the couch watching TV rather than working my dissertation. This was a few years ago, but she owned this house, and I have found so much about her and about her family. Her parents came to live with her, um, to move in with her when they retired. And she also, I'm finding information about my house because I had what I called the scary room. I recently had it torn down. I had a potting shed attached to the house. And I just had it removed, but she was a potter as well on the side. She, in addition to her, I guess she wasn't busy enough being provost and vice provost of Texas Women's University. She was a potter on the side, and she also was an amazing gardener. I still have a beautiful yard because of her, because of Dr. Davis. And so I've looked her up and stalked her. And it has been fun to find more information about her. As I was getting ready for this presentation, I actually found a lot more information. For instance, we're always adding newspapers to the collection. So I'd realized, oh, her parents moved in with her, and they moved in with her before she'd moved to Woodland Street. Okay. Um, and then when searching, I'm going to give you an example here. We host newspapers as well as many, many, many other objects in the Portal, Texas history. If anyone here is from Denton, you will have heard of the Evers Hardware Store, and the Evers House, which is a mansion down on Oak Street. Oak Street's kind of the early settlers, very wealthy mansion area for the city. And one of my coworkers, Tim Garinger, conducted research to prepare a historical marker for it. Now, when you're conducting research in the Portal, Texas history, you need to be prepared to use different search strategies to find information. For instance, people aren't perfect. Surprise. I didn't know if you knew that. Um, but sometimes there will be typos in names. And you have to make sure to try different combinations in order to find all of the correct information. Um, there was a fire at this house. The Geringers found information about this whole history of the house in the newspaper program, and they prepared the historical marker. Tim and then Morgan Geringer, who is our head of special collections. But this was based on heavily research that they conducted in the Portal to Texas history. All right, now in terms of time periods, just to give you an idea of the scattering of issues we have. And here's an example of the St. Antonio. I wanted to make sure to include that. We have a tremendous number of newspapers spanning pre-Texas as a country, the years before that, as well as the Republic, and then also um, just coverage of what the Republic was like daily. And that's really, it was always interesting to see. Texas and the Civil War newspapers really, I would argue that they span from, I mean, the coverage, pre-Civil War coverage really does start around 1846, in that, not in the way of course those years start then, but in the way of the issues that Texas was dealing with were issues that it they were arguments and topics that they were fighting over long before the Civil War, almost 20 years, but were still relevant in the 1860s. Sam Houston, for instance, did not want to secede from the Union. He stepped down as governor merely because he knew how hard it was for Texas to be a republic. And you can read through these topics throughout the newspapers from, I mean, 1836 really as a republic, and then through statehood, and then up into secession. And I think that's a really interesting, um, the rhetoric is very interesting to read in the argumentation going on. We have heavy World War One coverage. This work was done very much through awards we received through the National Endowment for the Humanities, National Digital Newspaper Program, and World War One just happened to be a time period that we could easily focus on, and that there is a proliferation of newspapers for those years. So we've had it's really amazing to see that. And again, we do have daily newspapers. I didn't when I originally introduced the hyperlocal news, I didn't mean we don't do daily newspapers, but the smaller city daily newspapers are so valuable. For instance, Abilene was not a huge city at that point in time. Gainesville, not a big city. But the daily newspapers cover local people's reactions and involvement in World War One in a way that, for instance, the big city daily Dallas Morning News won't show. You're not going to get the Gainesville information viewpoint in a huge daily newspaper. Not that there's not value there, there is in those dailies. World War II. And I mentioned university newspapers and high school newspapers, but I forgot to mention that we do have quite a few base newspapers. Um, Camp Walters, Fort Hood, Camp House. We have some very interesting. Oh, and Cindy, remind me at the end to mention Camp House to you. We have some very valuable, interesting, and important newspapers, and the U.S. Battleship um, newspaper, very helpful for research. All right, so in these newspapers, I'm going to walk you through briefly things that are helpful, and then we're actually going to do a live demo. Um, the newspapers in the Portal, Texas history, if you haven't used it, do allow for full text highlighting of your search term. They allow you to zoom in, and I'll walk you through it. Faster navigation is word search. These all really help with research and make the time you might otherwise spend trying to navigate through a single newspaper issue much speedier. You are not going to waste your time as you're looking through newspapers. You will find a lot. I also think you get a lot more bang for your buck in terms of how much you're able to go through because of the options in the newspapers. So now I'm going to walk you through briefly um, a live demonstration, and then I will challenge you to do your own uh, searches. And let me pull this up. I will reshare my screen. All right. This is the Portal Texas History page. Now, you can always start searching here, and you can select any type. Newspapers are comprise around 850,000 objects of the 1.78 million objects on the portal, so roughly half. Or you can scroll down to the Texas Digital Newspaper Program. Now, there are a few things that when you first look at this collection, you might find helpful, and every collection on the portal to Texas functions this way. So um, TD&P happens to be the largest collection, but they all work the same way. So you are welcome um, to use any collection in the same method. We have a listing of titles. We get that asked all the time, do you have a title list? And we do. And you can also filter your titles if you want to find, for instance, one newspaper title. You can. Or you can browse through alphabetically as well. If you know you have a city name you're looking for, you can just look through and see, oh yeah, it starts with a C. Let's just see all the titles that came from that city. Um, in addition, we have a date navigation search. And this is really nice because if I know, I use this very often when I know I need to figure out what happened, how did people react to, let's see, maybe Pearl Harbor. It would probably be here. because if it's a weekly newspaper, it'd be published after December 7th. Let's see. No. Something got canceled. Demand for cattle, and I would bet you anything that there, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. Something to do with World War II happening. Problems with issues, but that's interesting that that doesn't have any. And I can look through the results and search through different options and see what people are saying about the war. And again, this is that local view. You can see what is going on within one town, within an area that's not a huge city. Aransas Pass is, even now, I think it has around 40 or 50,000 people, but not a huge city, and find out what their viewpoint was of what was happening. And that is the date filter. We'll go ahead and go back. All right, actually, I'll just do this. Sorry, there's not an easy way to go back once you've started digging into the newspapers, but then I always bump into other things and I get excited. So this is the date filtering. If you know that you're looking for an event, that's what I recommend the date filter to use. Then let's go back to overview. Um, you can also, of course, look at locations, and this is going to bring up the same map that I showed you earlier. The darker the blue generally indicates the more number of issues within that county. And you can filter here to look for a specific county. We do have a lot of newspaper issues for Denton County. Surprise. All right, now I'm going to walk you through searching within the newspapers. Now, there are a few different searches. I'm going to show you the basic search, which is using the search inside this collection box. If you're working with an item, or if you're working with a search term, always put it into quotation marks. So a term, not a single word. A single word doesn't need quotation marks, but a term does when it's multiple words. And here, this is a friend of mine challenged me to find a pecan pie recipe in every decade of the newspaper program. So we've started looking for pecan pie recipes. Actually, they don't really start appearing until the 20s. But you put that into quotation marks, and that will display the newspapers where the terms occur together. Pecan and pie are next to each other. Now, did you see what I did here with the decades? You can filter by decades. If you know, for instance, you're looking for something very general like a recipe, a decade is useful. If you're looking for something very specific like a wedding or for an obituary, the year is very helpful. And you can type year here. You can say 1970. That's very helpful. You can also look for months and days. So for instance, we'll pretend like pecan pie is the obituary we're looking for. We'll say we want something, we can pretend like it's Thanksgiving we're looking for. That's probably better. That makes more sense. A month, we'll say November, and then days. Let's go ahead and look at what we have. Let's see, there's a lot going on the 27th. Now when we go into this issue, I'm going to click on the issue. And if you look here on search inside, the search term is right there, and you can click on matching results. And then we can see where this pecan pie, a little bit of context occurs on the page and in the issue. This is page 3, this is page 2. And it looks like somebody did maybe a bake sale here. We can click there. And this is very hard to read. We can just get a sense of where the search term occurs on the page with the highlighting. Let's click on zoom. And then either using the wheel on your mouse or over here, and I'm sorry because my laptop screen is not very big. I can't show you. There's a plus and minus sign here. You can kind of see the minus, but if I plus and move that bar up, it will zoom in here. I usually use the wheel of my mouse, but yes, my laptop screen is not big. And here we go. This would have been, oh, it was a district meeting, and it does look like they had a bake sale as well. This always makes people hungry when I go through these things. Let's see. Arts, crafts, and baking presented. And then we have somebody here who'd made a pecan pie or bought a pecan pie for $4. That's a good price for a pecan pie. Now, when you've zoomed in to the item you want, you can share it. And if I wanted to permalink, I would copy the URL, click that, and I could either share it over if I wanted to share it in email with somebody. If I wanted to send it to a friend, I would do that. I could share it over Twitter or Facebook, or I could copy and paste it in chat, and you could click on it and visit. This isn't a recipe, but you could visit what was going on for the KJT KJZT district meeting. Now, when you're done, you can return to standard view and let's keep looking at our results. And let's see, maybe there is a pecan pie recipe, darn it. Let's look at the Leonard graphic. Well, it looks like WBXJ. What is with the call numbers here? Let's see. We can find where on the page it is, and then this is the literary club. Oh, okay. That was not the same. I wonder why that showed up that way. But we know what happened in the Kent home for the 1921 Literary Club, and this was in 1970 celebrating. They're about to, let's see, they're going to be close to having a 50th anniversary too in 1971. So yes, this is how you navigate through newspaper issues. You do have to return to pages. We do not have a next issue button in your search results. However, a check mark appears when you have already looked at a newspaper page because sometimes you get a lot of results and you do need to be able to see what issues you've worked with. Now, we have our search term pecan pie. I'm going to close these up because I want to see. I've removed those filters as you saw with the X's. Now let's say I know that I want to find a pecan pie recipe. I'm actually going to completely get out of this area, which is basic search. And again, basic search is when you have a search term that'll go together. Pecan and pie work together. Up here in the upper right-hand corner, we have a drop-down menu next to search. And I want to figure out, let's see, I want a pecan pie recipe. Let's look at proximity search. Proximity search is, I would say, the most helpful and most valuable search tool for my genealogists. Pecan pie is an easy example, but gosh, if you're looking for an obituary or a birth record or a wedding record, this is an amazing option. We're going to keep using pecan pie, but I want to make sure to show, clearly I've done this already. Pecan pie recipe. Now, you type in the different terms because we've looked for pecan pie in basic search and we found a few things, but we didn't find a recipe yet. Now I want something that has all of these words in it, pecan and pie and recipe. And I'm going to say within how many words of one another, since pecan pie and recipe probably occur around the same word, I will choose 5. Now, if I'm working with surnames, first names, and events, so for instance, a wedding, I have an ancestor named F.E. Kramer whose daughter Charlotte got married. I might say, try maybe 8 or 9 words because they might say bride, Charlotte, married, wore this dress, parents were very proud. It would be a little more spacing between Charlotte and F.E. But we're going to say 5 terms. We're going to choose full text. Always choose full text on this. And best match. Now, this is going to search the entire portal's Texas history. And it will come up with a lot of results. And I really only want newspapers. And newspapers are usually a lot more. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pick this top result, the Daily and Free Press. And I want to see what we get with matching results. Let's see, we have recipe here on page 4, and the date is November 4th, so it is entirely possible that we have found a pecan pie recipe before Thanksgiving. And it sure looks like it, doesn't it? Um, oh, Caro syrup. Of course it's Caro syrup. So delicious. Um, I always look, does it have butter or margarine? Butter or margarine, gosh. I always judge the recipes by how much butter they use. They're usually the best when they have a lot of butter. But here's what I wanted. I wanted to get an earlier pecan pie recipe, and this is from 1959. And I was able to find it because I said pecan and recipe within 5 words of each other somehow. And it looks like pie is a Southern heirloom recipe. That would be my guess of how this found the result. And that works so wonderfully with people and events. If you're looking for any kind of life event, historical event, a specific battle, or a location, a geographic location. For instance, I have a cousin, Morgan. On my mom's side, the family names are things like Peters, not very uh, specific at all. And Morgan Peters, my cousin, was somewhere in Ohio at a certain time, and it's very difficult to find him, but I can usually track him down when I put in that I knew who he was visiting, or I knew that he might be going to a certain location in Ohio or seeing family in Swissvale, Pennsylvania. That's how I use that very often. And I'll tell you what, proximity search is probably my very favorite search. But now I'm going to show you the guided search. Now we know we wanted pecan pie recipe, and we will put in this phrase pecan pie recipe, but I also want to have it be something for Thanksgiving. I want to see what else got served or got recommended to be served in newspapers. So let's go ahead. Now you can also add a date range here. You can exclude words and phrases, or you can just say search for all these words. That's actually a basic search, so I don't recommend that. Use the guided search for its most powerful options. Your date range, and then I always select all partners and all collections. That just searches everything on the portal, any language, any type, and then search. Now, I still want newspapers primarily. We have 27 matches. Um, let's see. It looks like we got only newspapers. So let's take a look. We have from 1988. And this date is November 20th. So we know for sure that Thanksgiving is going to be happening pretty darn soon. And let's see, we've got this is what I wanted, a listing of foods, a banquet menu of what was going on, what they were recommending for Thanksgiving. And it looks like we got all kinds of recipes here. Now, where's our pecan pie? There it is. And that's what I wanted because often these newspapers will publish the entire feast for Thanksgiving or other holidays too. And this is what I love to see. And then I love seeing the pictures too from the 80s. Um, those are always fun. But that's where you can find, for instance, if you need to find other family members who may have attended an event, or if you need to locate where people traveled. You can use this proximity or the guided searching to get a bigger picture of a situation, whereas proximity searching is giving you the details, the this, and this at this time, this happened. That's what I find most useful about those. And then we have something called advanced search, but advanced search, I'm not going to show you. Don't use it because it is really more for the librarians who create the database. We use it when we're in very specific instances, but it's only when you know exactly what's going on in a record rather than for the metadata. Now you can also, by the way, in addition to this, clicking here in the top right-hand corner, when you're in a search window, you can use tabs to move through here, though I like to click here. If you start from the main page on the Portal Texas History, you can conduct a search using these search options here. Now I'm going to show you one more item. On Explore By, there's an option to explore by different features. Now you can find location if you have one city. Resource type, for instance, I use that in the filtering for newspapers. But I'm going to show you subject right now. And remember, I was telling you about school newspapers, colleges, universities. I want to find what we have under schools. And I'm looking and I know that I want to get a lot of results. I'm going to guess that this is going to pull up some items, but what'll pull up the most is this. And we tag all of our school newspapers and everything related to a school with school students because they're created by the students. And I can look at the title and see all of our school newspapers here. And that was conducting an exploration by subject. I've been asked before about this, so I'll mention this. I've been asked about tornadoes and weather events. So this doesn't bring up a ton of newspapers, but it does bring up some really fascinating photographs of different things happening. And it looks like a letter talking about, um, I'm actually not sure why that would be marked with letter from Marguerite. News scripts, very common with this. All right. So that is how you work with the Portal Texas History on the different navigation features. I agree, the more butter the better. Um all right. Now I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to challenge you to do a scavenger hunt. So I will share a scavenger hunt activity. I hope you're at your computers and you have to practice what I just showed you. I will give you about 10 minutes and actually not 10 minutes. I'm sorry, that's a lot of time. I'll give you 5 minutes to look through this and don't hesitate don't hesitate to try the different search strategies I've shown you. But these came from my staff members, except Dr. Davis. The Dr. Davis example is from me. And I'm going to challenge you to find some information here to answer these questions. And I'll call on you. I will pick on you. And I will do some timing. So go ahead, have fun.
Anna, I'm going to ask a question quickly. I was going to do the search, but because I'm recording, I'm not sure if it'll mess it up. So, but I do want to try this later. I do have a question on, can you search, is there an easy click to search within a decade? I want to find an obituary in the 70s, but I don't know when.
There is. Yes. On the guided search, you can enter dates. You can enter a span of dates, and that's where you'll use it. So where you have the guided search, if you have the person's name, put their full name. I can't show it either because I've got the questions up. Put their full name in one box, and then down below the include these words and exclude these words is a span of dates you can put in. So you could put in from January 1, 1970 to December 31, 1979.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. In the basic search, we needed to have the quotes, but in the others, you do not need quotes.
Nope, you do not need quotes on the others, only the basic search.
Okay, great. It is amazing, just amazing.
All right, you have 2 minutes left.
Okay, so I have another question while we're doing the last minute. Are there other states that have things similar to this?
Yes, Oklahoma has something exactly like the Portal Texas History because we run it. Our partners with the Oklahoma Historical Society, and I'll walk you through a few of the and then I will give you a listing at the end of different state projects. There's one location you can get to find these.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
All right, 30 seconds. Okay, and stop. So I will ask for some volunteers who found who His Persian Majesty was.
I found that one, I think. A kitty cat named the Ensign.
And where did you find him? And how did you find him?
Um, I think I just did a standard search, and in quotes, I did Persian Majesty, and then saw the 1922 date on the newspaper.
Very good. You may have noticed he made a lot of titles. He was in about 20 different newspaper titles for the same entry.
It said he's from 1922, from a lady in New York. I mean, not New York. The cat.
Yeah, I found my result in the Brownwood Bulletin.
Yes.
Yeah, I found it in Brownsville Herald and the Brownwood Bulletin.
Yep, he was popular. All right, now this one is a little more difficult, and I deliberately picked this because I was hoping you'd be able to try out the other search options. When did Ethelyn Davis first start teaching? Did anyone find it?
No, not yet.
No, I haven't.
Okay. I'm going to briefly walk you through how to find it. And this is going to take advantage of the guided search. And let me share my screen. This is, so she was Dr. Davis in many of the newspapers later on. She was Miss Davis in the earlier newspapers before she finished her dissertation. And we'll look up Ethelyn and we will exclude doctor. And then I know the date range, but I'm not going to put in a date range. And we'll go ahead and search everything. Nope. Now, why did that not find it? Good grief. Oh, maybe I didn't. Sometimes you do need to have capitalizations. I forgot about that. Sorry, I'm being lazy here. Let's try that. Still might not find it. Now, why did this work earlier? Let's find this. So now my search didn't work, and I'm going to show you what happened here. Let's go to decades and filter by decades. And I know it was in the 1940s when she first started teaching. So I'm going to pick the earliest year that shows up under the Denton Record Chronicle and look at matching results. And oh, that's why. I know exactly what happened. I had chosen to remove doctor, but doctor appeared within the same article. What I should have looked up was Miss Ethelyn Davis. But it eliminated, the search worked exactly right. It removed where doctor occurred. See, Dr. Margaret Cooper. She first started teaching in 1941 or 1942 at Texas Women's University, or at that time, Texas State College for Women at that point. All right, did anyone have a chance to look at the last question. What were Mays and Harris?
Hi. I just did what I think was probably a basic search with that. I didn't have time to do all of these. I guess I'm a slow searcher. So I just put that initially, just kind of start with those names and quotes, and I got results from a department store in the Rusk. I got papers that were from Henderson, Texas, Rusk County, perhaps, if that's correct. And it sounds like it was a department store, but that's as far as I got. I didn't get the who were they as much as a business name. So I don't know if that was the answer you
They
were
were a
looking
what?
for.
That is exactly the answer.
They were. Oh, good.
You got it. Yep.
Oh,
And
very
They
good. So,
were a very big department store.
and they were celebrating their
okay.
50th anniversary, so they had been there for a while.
They had some of the best drawn ads.
Oh yeah, no, I got quite a few hits there with their name in it. Mostly it was just like it's ads from the 1940s. The one I'm looking at is from the 1940s. So well, great, because I just did the first the easiest thing first, then I guess learning to use. I was unaware of the search features, like you had introduced the guided search with the proximity words. I've never used that, learned about that before. So that's definitely a feature I'm going to be using in the future.
Good. That's why we do the scavenger hunt. Always start at the beginning with a basic search. The search strategies, let me pull up the search strategies. This is why we do this. Just start basic and then try to move forward with guided search and proximity search. As you get more information, your basic search is going to catch a lot of fish. Sometimes though, you'll find that it's either too much or not quite right. That's when you're going to look toward guided or toward proximity. For newspaper searching, proximity searching is so valuable, but you might already find what you need with the basic. So, and this is the Mays and Harris. I deliberately spelled it with an ampersand in the scavenger hunt to throw you off. But we loved these ads for Mays and Harris on the boots. So, yeah, just start small. Always use quotation marks in your searches. Try variations. Remember the Evans or the Evis N on the Denton newspaper collection. And then also pay attention to the highlighting for the keywords, because you might see, for instance, and I found this with a family member of mine, F.E. Krahmer, with the wedding I was telling you about. I found information about him, the announcement of his daughter getting married in one newspaper page, but then I looked in the upper corner and keyword searching had shown him again. It was a deed or a lawsuit. He had a couple things, debts going on from about 1888 to about 1910. And I saw that in another part of the newspaper page. So keep an eye out on that highlighting, because you might actually have really good luck there. When you are finding that the articles a, the, and, things like that, or prepositions are causing problems in your search when you're using basic search, that's where you want to switch to guided search and proximity search. The search engine on the Portal Texas History finds those words. It's confusing to say articles when I'm talking about newspapers too. It finds a, the, and, of, but. It finds those and tags every newspaper in the search results that contains those words, which is why when you switch to guided search, if you remove something, that can be helpful. Though again, like what happened with Dr. Davis, if I removed doctor, it removed every newspaper that had the phrase doctor in it. So be aware of that. But be aware you might stumble on some things when you're reading the whole page as well. So now I want to run you through some other items on the portal that you can combine when you're searching. I was able to learn that F.E. Krahmer, he was actually a great uncle of mine, that he'd had a business of his own, ran a bath company or baths, barbers in El Paso. They called it baths back in the 1900s. But he was a barber and he owned a shop. Other materials we have on the portal are very, very helpful for genealogy research and historical information just for finding different situations. So be aware that when you search, and as you saw what I was coming up with when I was searching, I found a lot of information. We have a huge city directory collection. We have city directories from Galveston, El Paso. I'm going to briefly actually stop this share and just show you on the portal the city directory collection because I think that's more useful than on the PowerPoint because you get the live demo. When you go to resource types on the portal, explore by resource types, and I can show you the different types. Let's see. Or the city it's a city directory collection. Sorry. When you go to collection search on the portal, I remember we named it city directory collection because we just wound up with city directories. There we go. We wound up with so many that we thought we better just create a collection for this. These are very rich in detail. I have found so much information. I'll just give you the example of F.E. Krahmer here. Full text searchable here as well. You can find all kinds of information of where their name occurs on a page, and it's so helpful for recreating their lives. And at that point, Baz was barbers, or he was helping the guys get their manis and petties. I'm not sure, but I think the theory is that he was a barber. And then those are very helpful. The other collections that are very useful are our probate cases. Our genealogists, we had a genealogy society fund this. This was done by the Dallas County Genealogical Society. This is an enormous collection. These do span all of these years, and it is an amazing set of materials here. The only problem is, unlike the city directories in the newspapers, the probate records are not fully text searchable unless we've recently changed that. Let me see. Oh, no, they aren't now, kind of. The reason they're not fully text searchable, that's what it was. The text in it is, but the handwriting is not. So you have to be able to pay attention to what's going on within the cases. So you have to have some idea of what you're looking for on that before you dig into them. But I do know that those are enormously helpful to our genealogists. Another
And
collection. Yes.
oh, is that something that is in progress? Having people index those records? No?
Unfortunately, it's not. The portal Texas history doesn't have a really great way of displaying indexed information. So now I say that for the portal. Now it is entirely likely that the Dallas Genealogical Society has indexed these. And it's just not on the portal Texas history. And if you do need this information, I would be glad to get you in contact with some folks over there. They're very dear friends of ours, and they'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
I have a question again.
Yes.
I'm intrigued by this, what you're doing with the city directories, and I can't seem to repeat what you are doing. So could you go back and just quickly give the directions about how to find the city's
Absolutely.
directory collection? I
Under
don't know. Somehow
Oh, no.
I'm looking at two screens and I've lost the directions.
That is just fine. I'm throwing a lot of information at you. Under Explore, there's a drop-down menu, and if you go to Collections,
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay.
then you can either click C, but that'll still produce a lot of results. You could just type city directory. And if you start to type filter collections, you'll find that.
Under
And
filter
we
collections. Okay.
love the city directories. We would love to be able to add
Right.
more. The problem is copyright. A lot of materials in city directories are copyrighted, or copywritten. So it's very hard to get permissions to digitize beyond 1925.
Hmm. I don't
All
think I've
right,
heard that before. Thank you very much.
you bet. And then one other collection that I have found, Sturpees. I think you probably already saw me mention that in the PowerPoint, but that's another collection, and you can just go to Explore by Collection, and then oddly type in Sturpees, and you will find Sturpees. Tremendously helpful. I have found F.E. Kramer in Sturpees as well, and I was able to find some information about the family, his children, of what was going on there. Um, and then also another collection that you might find helpful. I have not used it for my own genealogy. I don't have any family in this area, but you may find helpful is the KXAS NBC5 news collection. This is their entire archive, and they've licensed it to University of North Texas Libraries. Our special collections department will digitize things on demand even if you know that you need some information um, about or need something within an archive. And we put these onto the portal Texas History. In addition, we have the video clips tied to the transcripts. So we have a video clip here that is going to be silent, of course, because it was just a film strip. But when you go down to see, it is connected to a related item, a news script, and you can actually read the script as you're watching the video. And often, if you're doing searches for family that are you're trying to find them within about 1950 to around 1980, you might find your family members within these news scripts. And you'll see that first, but they're also tied to um, the film as well, to the live film, which is kind of neat. All right. Oh, I'm so sorry. We're running a little over. In the interest of time, I'm going to stop on this part because I did want to answer Carrie's question. Um, and please don't hesitate to email me either. Other states. Chronicling America is represents all 49 states plus Washington D.C. It is one state, as well as Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. It works very similarly to the newspaper collections on the portal Texas History. You can search for full names and full terms, and it will highlight the materials. The Gateway to Oklahoma History is a partnership between the Oklahoma Historical Society as well as University of North Texas Libraries. We are in the process of digitizing all of the newspapers that they hold at OHS. OHS was started by the Press Association of Oklahoma, so they have an almost complete set of newspapers for the entire state's history, starting with statehood though, so that is a little later, although they have a huge set of newspapers prior to statehood as well. And then in terms of other states, if you are looking for that one family member who got very, very drunk back in 1898 and he crossed over the state line somewhere either to Arkansas or Louisiana and you're not quite sure, and that comes from a real question I got asked, you can use the State Memory Project listing to find where he went, and it turns out that he got married and had kids and straightened up in Arkansas. That's a real story. But this is a very helpful listing of all of the state digital imaging and cultural heritage projects that are freely available online. This is well maintained, and you will be shocked by how much more kind of color you can fill in about your ancestor's life or about a historical event going on. And I think that that's actually one of my very favorite sites just to lose myself in. I can't visit it very often because I spend hours on it. And then, oh, if you have any questions, you can either email me, Ana Krahmer at unt.edu, or my colleague who works with metadata, Tim Geringer. He can also answer a lot of questions that you may have. Feel free to write to either one of us and you will always get an answer. If you'd like to see your newspaper available on the Portal Texas History and you are from Texas, please email one of us because we work with institutions all the time to help them obtain grant funding and to preserve and build access to their newspapers. And we would love to hear from you. Are there any questions?
Well, Anna, I was just wondering if there's a way to donate items for your collection.
Send me an email.
Okay, because I have a few I've scanned and put on my blog and made text searchable, but I would love to add them to the portal so they have a broader reach.
We can work with that.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? I thought this was a great presentation. You covered so much and were so clear in your instructions and directions. So anybody else want to ask a question, or did she get it all? Okay, looks like you did a pretty darn good job of covering your material, Anna.
Well, you're welcome to email me too. Please don't hesitate to email with anything.
Yeah, I love how I know that you do a lot of presentations virtually, and I love your generosity of being willing to talk to people and show us how to do this. So thank you so much for being willing to present with us today. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. This is a great group. I love the family search groups. I'm enjoying all of these so much. So if you guys ever need anything, please reach out. I am happy to help you out.